Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The Long Island Report. Best of.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. On the call with me is my esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the state vice chair of the Republican Party, as well as the county chair of Suffolk County. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged indeed to have a good friend, a brilliant government official, a great governor of this great state, Governor David Paterson. Governor, welcome aboard. We're very happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good to meet you, Jesse.
So,
my pleasure. Thank you for being here, sir.
So let's do the obvious one first, which is we had the first of 2 primary elections yesterday, and there were some obvious results and some mixed results. Governor, what do you think about yesterday's primary?
Well, I was sure that Governor Kathy Hochul would win the primary, and I thought she would win by double digits, but she was getting close to triple digits. She beat Jumaane Williams by 50 points, and she beat Tom Suozzi by 56 points. So that was a clear statement that she is the winner. It was low turnout, and that's always a factor as to how those votes will translate in a general election. And I was surprised that the lieutenant governor, Mr. Delgado, was able to win by the same margin that Hochul did, which I thought was quite interesting because he only became lieutenant governor about a month ago and got the approval to run by the legislature about a month and a half ago. So for him to run up that margin, although he had some, I thought, very interesting and energizing television commercials.
Okay. And Jesse, what did you think on the Republican side? What did you think of the result of that 4-way primary for the governorship?
I was very optimistic about going the process in. Lee Zeldin, a member of the Suffolk County, a resident of Suffolk County, he'll be the first and only first governor from Suffolk County when he's elected on November 8th. But the numbers he ran up were impressive. I believe that the Republican side was a far more competitive race than from start to finish than the Democratic side. But we saw that Lee Zeldin was able to articulate and passionately lay out a plan to save New York, to bring a common sense and agenda that will seek common ground and break the gridlock of one-party rule in Albany. And the voters of this state responded amazingly. In a 4-way race, he received about north of 44% of the votes cast, and almost 20 points plus more than his closest competitor. At the end of that evening, the United Republican Party was united. We're going to move forward together because we have one goal in mind. And as a tip of the hat, and I will take a little bit of privilege here, to the members and the volunteers of the Suffolk County Republican Committee, my committee at home here, we overwhelmingly ran up the numbers for Lee Zeldin. And what we saw is, I think we provided about 47,000 votes for his total number of about 193,000 votes, and that represented about almost 25% of the votes. Between us and Long Island and Nassau County, we were about 78,000 votes for Lee Zeldin. And maybe a little bit later we'll discuss the fact that one small anecdote that we picked up here in Suffolk County, and I think we saw throughout the state, is a bunch of voters, not of the Republican Party, who were energized and wanted to vote Republican for Lee Zeldin, but could not because the election law says only members of that party could. And that day, on Tuesday, they started the process of switching from Democrat and independent and whatever party they may have been, switching to the Republican Party, which bodes well as we go forward into November for Lee Zeldin.
Well, Governor, let me ask you a question. Let's do a prediction, an analysis and prediction. What do you think is going to happen in November? First the governor, then the chairman. Governor.
Well, I think that Governor Kathy Hochul will be reelected. And I think she'll be reelected for two reasons. One is the work that she's done, really turning that governor's office around because it was a toxic environment, and also putting people in charge of agencies who really have the capacity to understand what they're doing as opposed to the kind of micromanaging that was going on. And also her speed in addressing issues, which I thought was lacking prior. The other reason that I think she's going to win is not because of her so much, or even because of Congressman Zeldin. It's just that right now there is an atmosphere based on the Sullivan Law, the overturning of New York's gun statutes, and also the issue of voting rights, and of course also the issue of choice, that most New York voters are not going to support Congressman Zeldin because of some of the points of view that he has. Now, what could have overcome that would be the crime rate, the, in my opinion, lack of empathy of too many Democrats in the state right now about the crime rate, the ignorance of many of the legislators about what bail even means, more or less bail reform. And I think they would have played a greater role, but I think we're in this sort of situation where the national issues may actually propel the governor more than the local ones.
So let's switch some gears. We talked about the governor's race, and I want to ask the governor and the chairman, what do you think about the prospects of changes in the state legislature itself, both the state Senate and the Assembly? I'll start with you, Governor.
I actually agree with the county chair, Jesse, on that. I think that the supermajority was a reaction to Donald Trump in 2018. That's when you saw these huge moves where the Democrats went from 2 seats down to 17 seats up in one election. And I think in 2020, it was more of the same because Trump was actually on the ballot. But we don't know. We know that Donald Trump is no longer president, and he's not on the ballot. So now some of these legislators are going to have to defend their actions on their own. And some of their blind disregard for some of the issues that New Yorkers face. And listen, the fear of crime is as much an indicator as the commission of crime. And so I do think that my party will lose seats in the Senate and the Assembly. They will not lose enough for anyone, in my opinion, to change the way they've been not cooperating with the important public issues. However, if they're going to cooperate, I think they will do so more for Governor Hochul than for Governor Zeldin, who would be his views are just not in sync with theirs. So his ability to change things would be as impaired as Governor Hochul's was. The real issue right now would be that the legislature kind of wake up and recognize that we're having a very increased focus on crime. And unlike the crime in the 80s, what's different now is the crime in the 80s came from crack being basically the epicenter of the beginning of crack was in New York City. It was in Harlem. But it spread to different neighborhoods. But as long as you stayed away from those neighborhoods, you were all right. But you could get hurt on 61st and Park Avenue now. And that's, I think, what's frightening New Yorkers all over the state even more.
Jesse, what do you say about the state legislative prospect?
I think we're in agreement. I think the state legislature's supermajorities are going to be broken. I think that we're going to see significant gains. And it's my hope, though, that – and you know what? The one telling sign we have here, and I believe Governor Paterson is someone who actually utilized these tools and provided it, is that a soon-to-be Governor Zeldin will be able to use the budget and the laws that were enacted or the decisions that were enacted after, I believe, Governor, you took the legislature to court to ensure the powers of the executive, where the executive has more authority when it comes to a budget, even if it's not settled. And I believe that's going to be a tool he's going to be able to use, whether both chambers remain Democrat or even if one chamber goes to the other. Those are tools that need to be used to do what needs to be enacted for the purposes of ensuring small businesses are protected, school reform is affected, and we have issues like mandates and whatnot go about the wayside. Some policy issues and policy differences that will force legislators through those tools to seek a compromise and common ground.
I have to say, gentlemen,
I just must say, Your Honor, that I am beaming.
Yes.
Because I thought somewhere in this state somebody remembered that I actually did that, and now I found that person. Well, I am quite honored.
We're going to give Jesse. We're going to give him a merit badge.
Well, very briefly, it was just that what the legislature would do is just hold up the budget process.
Yes.
And stop the governor from doing what the governor wanted to do. What I did was we researched and found out that the extenders that extend government while you're still negotiating a lot of the issues, that those extenders are offered by the governor but cannot be negotiated. The legislature has to vote it up or down. And you should have seen the faces of former Senate Majority Leader who wound up in a whole lot of trouble, John Sampson, and former Republican leader and former Speaker Sheldon Silver when I told them I was going to do that, because that moved the power that the governor has, and whichever candidate wins this race will be able to exercise. So, Jesse, I owe you one.
Well, actually, the entire population of the state of New York owes you, Governor, on that one. Let me ask you this question. I'll give you my take, and I'll get the opinion of the governor and the chair. I thought yesterday's legislative results, and remember, we're only talking about the assembly, as both of you gentlemen know. The August 23rd, the second primary, will have the congressional seats and the state senate seats. But I thought the results were pretty good in pushing back the extreme left-wing tide of the Democratic Socialists and the Working Families Party. They picked up maybe 2 or 3 seats, but I think they pretty much were beaten back because there was a whole attempt to change. I don't know what the number was. Every time you read a different article, it says something else, 9, 11, 13 seats. So, Governor, what do you say about that?
Well, I've been saying, and of course, you and I are both on Cats at Night, so you know that I've been saying this the last year, that this whole issue about defunding the police probably relates to 10 to 12% of Democratic voters. Nobody wants to defend the police. In fact, Mayor David Dinkins, when he was in office, he actually expanded funding for the police.
Let the record be clear, Governor. Let's be clear. That was a Speaker Peter Vallone initiative, and Mayor Dinkins went along with it. I want the record to be clear.
Yes, he did. And,
Thank you.
And they both came, and Vallone was right there in Albany in the Senate and in the Assembly when we voted for it. So kudos to our dear friend as well. But I really think, particularly when economic times are as harsh as they are now, that voters are more pragmatic. They don't want to hear about, what the communists thought when they were drinking tea in 1949 after the revolution in China. They don't want to hear any of that. They think about their weekly budget. They think about filling up a car with gas and paying $85 for it. And they think about who they think would be most able to alleviate that. And so I thought it was a small percentage but a resounding rejection of this kind of socialist thinking.
Jesse.
I wish I agree with the governor on a lot of points, but I still believe that the Democrats in control of the state legislature and of the governor's mansion in the state of New York are still beholden. They're captured and they're captive of the far left group. They're captured and captured by the Generises of the world, the AOCs of the world, and so forth. That's what has led to us, unfortunately, to these very failed policies that are hurting taxpayers in their pocketbook and making them feel unsafe in their communities, while Albany and bureaucrats and elected officials continue to try and isolate us by, forwarding and advancing these type of mandates that threaten our liberties and our freedoms. I still think that, unfortunately, these leaders in both chambers are beholden and are fearful of those factions in their chambers because they want to hold on to their leadership positions. But in doing so, it's an average New Yorker that's suffering from all this.
All right, we have to take a break now. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. On the call with us is Governor David Paterson and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We're going to take a break and we'll be back in a moment.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
The Long Island Report. Best of.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Chairman Jesse Garcia. Jesse's the vice chairman of the state Republican Party, as well as the county chair of the Suffolk County Party. And we're honored and privileged today to have with us Ed Cox, a very dear and close friend, a regular with John Catsimatidis and me on Cats at Night on WABC. And Ed is the former chair of the state Republican Party, a great lawyer, a great historian. Ed was chair of the Republican Party for 10 years. He also has the honor and privilege of having been the son-in-law to President Richard Nixon. And one of the things we'll talk about with Ed today is the America's China problem.
And Richard, from Suffolk County, Long Island.
And imagine that. And Suffolk County, Long Island. But the most important thing is he really is a China hand. He really understands the China issue, which we'll talk about. So in the first segment today, I want to start off by adding something to our agenda, gentlemen, which wasn't on when I started putting the list together, which is this fiasco of executing a search warrant in President Trump's Florida home. So let me begin with Ed. What do you think about that search warrant, Ed?
The search warrant was one that never should have been issued. Apparently, it was just had to do with papers that were deemed to be supposed to be under protection, and every former president has a back and forth with the archives about what's personal and what really belongs to the public under the presidential papers. Now, that's a civil document. There's no criminal penalties in that document per se. So to have that kind of a raid, they were clearly looking for something else in the process, and I suspect it was a fishing expedition, a dragnet, in essence, for whatever they could pick up to try and incriminate Trump, particularly with the January 6th committee hearings.
Okay. Let me share my thoughts, then we'll get to Jesse's thoughts on this. Number one, there was a great column in the Wall Street Journal this week by Dan Henninger, who has a column every week in the Journal, and he's the deputy editor of the editorial page as well. And he's saying that this is a search warrant that never should have been executed. The harm to the country, the weakness and divisiveness it shows to our outside enemies is awful. They're going to take advantage of this because it shows a divided country, a divided government. This is a terrible thing to do on that level. Ed's point is it is a civil matter. It's no big deal. They were having voluntary compliance negotiations. There was a grand jury subpoena that they were compliant with. There was no reason to execute a search warrant. It's a combination, it seems to me, of political theater to try to embarrass the former president, as they see him as a formidable future candidate for the presidency. And not only that, it was, as Ed correctly points out, a fishing expedition. And Ed, I don't know, and Jesse, I don't know if you saw the column by Andy McCarthy in the National Review and also in the New York Post, and he was on our Cats at Night show the other night with us, Ed. He points out this whole thing was a subterfuge, has nothing to do with the documents. It was a fishing expedition merely to get documents on the January 6th to try to hook Trump on something. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll turn this over for Jesse's comments, another great piece in the Wall Street Journal this week by Rifkin of the Baker Hostetler firm out of Washington, D.C., points out that even if Trump were convicted of a crime under this document retention or illegal document retention, that will not, as a matter of constitutional law, be a disqualifying event to bar Trump from either running for or holding the office of president should he be elected in 2024. Jesse, your turn.
Number one, it's great to be here, Mr. Chairman. You're a great friend, and I'm glad you're here with us. And that's first and foremost. But on the Trump matter, it's un-American, first and foremost. I'm not the lawyer in this room, but it's un-American what the FBI, the DOJ has done. And you can see that the Democrats have been weaponizing Department of Justices and AG offices in this country and throughout this nation in different states. We've seen Soros bankroll liberal, progressive attorney generals and DAs locally to try and change the criminal justice system and make it basically soft on crime and make them political weapons. This is nothing more than a weaponization of the Department of Justice, of law enforcement. It's wrong. But I have to tell you, I've spoken to a number of former U.S. attorneys' offices, U.S. attorney former U.S. attorneys, and prosecutors. And they're all wondering what is going on here. Number one, those former U.S. attorneys said that these decisions and this warrant should never have been issued. Number two, even if it is a fishing expedition, if they find something, and I'm not clear on the law because I'm not a lawyer, thank God, but they said they're going to have to go back and get another warrant to allow to admit whatever they have found in this fishing expedition. This is, if it's political in nature, what they did is going to backfire. Number one, if the president was on the fence of maybe running or not running, this has definitely pushed him over the line that he is going to run. He is the Democrats' worst nightmare. And the other thing is, while they were talking about a surge and maybe that this red wave and the Democrats were going to survive a little bit better in the midterms, this is completely energized and expanded the growth of the red wave and the Republican wave that's coming. Because if they could do this to a former president, they can knock down the doors like in Nazi Germany or in Putin's Moscow, knock down your home door, go through your businesses, and just take your life without any due justice.
Let me follow this up with one thing. This was also unprecedented. And let's trace that back. Mrs. Clinton, a candidate for president, had on her server in her home, unprotected, lots of secret stuff going through it that should have been protected, was not, and they suspect that, in fact, foreign powers tapped into it. This is never done to her. They never raided her house for the server. They, at her interview with respect to it, she was given, and Your Honor, Richard, you could do better than I saying how she was treated very specially in that interview and the other witnesses were.
Well, first of all, they allowed, which is absolutely incredible, when she was being interviewed in question, they allowed her lawyer to sit in on the interviewing, which is unheard of, to have a lawyer. And
they wouldn't even.
And and that lawyer, by the way, was saying as a lawyer, was later a witness. So it's totally reprehensible how that whole thing was conducted. If they wanted to do a number on Hillary Clinton, they could have done a number on Mrs. Clinton. And remember how the whole thing played out. Comey, who's the FBI director, And remember what the FBI is. It's not a prosecutor. It's an investigative office. So when they went in and he stood up before the cameras, and he loved cameras, Comey, and he loved being the center of attention. He got up there and he laid out a bill of particulars, a bill of indictment against her, and everybody thought he was going to say that the woman should be indicted with turning over with a recommendation to the Justice Department to indict. And then at the end, he exonerated and said, well, we really don't have enough here to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. And he cut off the inquiry. That's not his role as the FBI director. That's not his role at all. He was totally beyond the pale. But yet, nobody seems to remember that. And as Ed just pointed out, the first time in history you've gone after a former president. The FBI has not done itself any credibility here. Its reputation, going back to the Russian collusion matter, its work with respect to the Steele document, the two phony and impeachment proceedings against President Trump, the way they've looked away from the whole the Hunter Biden matter with his deals with Ukraine and Russia and China. It looks like you have partisan Justice Department, a partisan FBI, and this is absolutely awful. And I think Judge Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, has a lot of explaining to do. What say you, Jesse?
Coming from a layman, everything you outlined here and Chairman Cox outlined basically tells the average American, the average New Yorker, that there are two tiers of justice in America. There's one for the elite, the Democrats in power, and there's another one for everyone else. And that if you pop off and have a different opinion, and you challenge the status quo, the elite Democrats and progressive socialist Democrats who want to cling on to power, that what they're going to do is they're going to send in law enforcement that's funded by taxpayers and has unlimited money to squeeze you to silence your voices. They're doing this just by this new bill that's being done and it's going to be approved by the House of Representatives that's coming forward, where they're going to give us 87,000 new IRS agents for the purposes of not going after the big tech companies, not after Soros and companies like that. They're going to be going after Main Street businesses, average taxpayers, families. That's how they're going to go after them. They're going to use and weaponize the IRS, the Department of Justice, to fund their failed policies. And right there, this is nothing more than un-American. It's unpatriotic. It's not what our founding fathers had ever expected this country to be when they set those foundations of stones down on our country.
Ed, let me, with respect to Comey's indictment, non-indictment of Mrs. Clinton, I've never heard this kind of analysis before. This is what I think happened. The President of the United States, Obama, decided we're not going to indict her. They picked the Republican who, in fact, could say she's not going to be indicted. That was Comey. He was instructed to do that. It was not his job. He knew it. But he wanted to clean the skirts of the FBI, say, we did a thorough investigation because he is head of it. That's why he went through that full analysis, everything that was done, and then he did what the president required him to do as a Republican to give cover, because he is a Republican, to say what he said, and that is, but we're not going to indict her. That's what happened. And that could be happening here. This could be coming from the president, from the White House.
Well, I think these are very troubling times. You have Tish James, who I know well. In fact, Tish tried cases before me when she was a lawyer and I was a sitting judge. And on a personal level, I like Tish. But I have to say, her whole campaign running for Attorney General was that she was going to go after Donald Trump and the Trump family interests. And she's done just that. So what you have is you have the following things going on against Donald Trump. You have the FBI and the Justice Department. You have the State Attorney General of New York. You had the District Attorney of New York County looking at it. You just had a ruling from the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia saying that the House Ways and Means Committee can get all of Trump's tax records. I mean, so you look at this, they're hitting him on every side they can possibly think of. It borders on what they call the Trump obsession. This is absolutely incomprehensible. And politically, I have to say, it does two things. It moves Trump in a way that he has to now make a decision, which I now think he's going to announce for the presidency again. and it probably moves up his timetable for doing this. He might have waited till after the midterms to do this, but now I think he's going to be under pressure to try to push back to announce before. I may be wrong about that. And the other thing that it does is it enrages the people who want fairness, not just the people who believe in Trump, the man, or Trump's policies, but people like me who just think this is an outrageous, vindictive approach that's divisive to the country. And Biden was a guy who got up there and gave an inaugural address talking about uniting the country. This country, as a result of this kind of action, will be more divisive and continue these political partisan wars into the next decade. And this is just awful. What say you, Jesse?
Ed, if I may, Ed, I have a question for Ed, and I agree with you, Your Honor. Ed, you were probably one of the closest venues to the Oval Office. How could this president say that he was not informed that the Department of Justice was doing this through the FBI? I mean, I remember working for a town supervisor, which is the equivalent of Brookhaven Town. If there was something of a major execution, it was my obligation as the chief of staff to let him know, by the way, we have to do this in accordance with the law, or for whatever reasoning, there's going to be, we're going to have to answer it. We're going to be questioned on it. How did he not know this, leader of the free world?
Jesse, your instincts are right on here. There's no doubt. At the very least, the White House would have been informed. Now, whether they actually clued in the president or not is another question. But the fact is that the White House had to be informed on this. You're absolutely right.
Look, let's be clear. There are reports, and I don't know if they're correct or not, there are reports that the Secret Service was given a heads up that something was going to happen to make sure that President Trump was not at the venue in Florida. And they didn't want to have a confrontation between the Secret Service and the FBI swooping in, because part of the obligation of the Secret Service to defend the man, they have to defend the property, because who are these people coming in? Now, I'll tell you what bothered me, and Kevin's given me the sign that we have to break. We have 1 minute. But I'll tell you what bothered me most of all. And I asked Andy McCarthy this, and I asked Rudy Giuliani this as well, both very, very fine U.S. attorneys and prosecutors. I said, how does the FBI have the authority to go in to a private residence where the lawyers were there and the Secret Service were there and tell them to turn off the security cameras? What right, as a matter of law, does the FBI have on private property? It's one thing to execute a search warrant, but what right do they have to take away a recording of what's going on? I know, having signed at least 1,000 search warrants over the years, that in the 15 years I was on the bench, I would tell you, you have to rigorously look at the supporting documentation for the search warrant before you grant it, and you want to make sure that it's duly executed. And if you have cameras that's seeing how it's being duly executed, that's good evidence whether it's done correctly or incorrectly. So how dare the FBI tell them to cut it off? That bothers me enormously, and both Rudy Giuliani and Andy McCarthy said to me that I was right, that they have no legal right to do that. Kevin has given me that Kevin look. We're about to take a break. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Suffolk County Republican Party, as well as the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged to have our very good friend, esteemed lawyer, and former Chair of the State Republican Party, Ed Cox, with us in the studio. We'll be back in a moment.
The Long Island Report, Best of.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and very good friend, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk Republican Party. In the studio with us is another close and wonderful friend, Tony Carbonetti. Tony Carbonetti is a wise and distinguished public servant. He's in the private sector now for all the years of the Giuliani administration. He was the chief of staff to Mayor Giuliani, one of the people who truly helped to save our city, and an astute public policy and political analyst. So the three of us are going to have a conversation. Let me start off by talking about what I'll call the Trump factor in the midterm elections. This is my view, and I talked about this previously, but I want to say it again because I think it's worthy of talking about. Tony is a Republican. Jesse is Republican. I'm the House Democrat. But my view is that Trump had a very successful presidency. He was very good on his public policies. He was very good on the economy. He was very good on the threats to us internationally, particularly the Chinese. Our borders were safe. Our economy was good. He was a good president. Biden, in my humble opinion, is a failure as a president. He's done everything wrong. I can't think of anything that Biden has done right. And I say that as the Democrat. But I think the wild card for the midterm elections is the Trump factor. I think there's a civil war going on in the Republican Party, just as there's a civil war going on in the Democratic Party. And I'm very concerned. Everybody is very sanguine about a so-called red wave, which would give us balanced government, checks and balances against the Democrats controlling the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And I think Trump can undermine that with some of the candidates he's pushed forward for Congress and for the United States Senate. And I'm not sanguine that the Senate will be won by the Republicans, and I don't think the Republicans will win the House as strongly as they think they will. So first I'll turn it over to Tony, then for his comments, and then we'll turn it over to Jesse for his comments.
Well, thank you, Judge, for having me, and thank you, Jesse. When you talk about the Trump factor, I'm starting to liken it to the Tea Party. We're going to determine now this election day whether it's similar to the Tea Party, where he can get candidates through primaries but not get them elected in a general election. And if that turns out to be the case, we're all going to suffer. You know, we had, it was 2 or 3 Senate seats back in the Tea Party days that we knew we were going to win, and then the Tea Party ended up winning those primaries and we lost the general election. I think we thought we were taking Harry Reid out at one point. Yeah,
that's what the Greeks call a Pyrrhic victory.
Yes.
A false victory.
Yes. So I think that's what we have to determine this cycle. And I think everyone's waiting to see just how much punch the Trump wave has. And we'll see that here. On the Democratic side, I think the Democrats haven't suffered from the progressive movement because the progressives are taking out Democrats in Democratic primaries that are Democratic seats. So they haven't had to put them forth for a general election in a real purple area or a place they could lose. So the progressives keep beating their chest saying they're victorious, but they're winning seats, they're winning primaries in seats they can't lose in November.
Very interesting. Jesse, your take.
I understand that, and I think that when you have primaries of any level throughout this county, the state, or the country, you're going to have those type of situations work out. And come to be. I really can't speak to a lot of things that are nationally, but at least here in Suffolk County, the state of New York, I think that the primaries that they've shaken out actually have helped in our abilities to secure even more House seats than we were looking at. Just looking at the fact of what we did here in Suffolk County when we had, we had people spending $3.2 million for the purposes of not so much the Trump factor, but, for their own cryptocurrency industry and creating a special interest there. And, of course, we had those people who touted that they were Trump, but really weren't backed by Trump or really involved in Trump at all. They bought endorsements from lower-level associates of the Trump administration. So I think that as you speak to New York, especially down here in downstate, that, we've put forward candidates that embrace and actually exude the principles of the Trump presidency, and in many cases share those with the president, and also that the basic tenets and fundamental principles of the Republican Party, which are in sync, and the voters responded to that. But I don't disagree. There are some places throughout the country, as Tony pointed out and you have pointed out, Your Honor, that some of the candidates that have come forward may be problematic in the general election. But I still, the goal is still to take back the House. I think that's going to be successful. I think that path to the House is coming through Long Island and maybe electing 4 congressmen from Long Island for the first time in generation, and then throughout the state and the country.
No, I think that's right. I mean, the House, I think, we're pretty secure. I don't know. In New York, they beat back the gerrymandering, but in other states around the country, I think the gerrymandering has been such that we can't win the 60 seats, but we could surely win low 40s, maybe high 30s, and be pretty secure. I was specifically talking about the 2 Senate races in Georgia and Pennsylvania, where I think we may have nominated candidates that aren't electable statewide, and we'll see. That was my concern, Jesse.
Yeah, I do believe I see the issues in Pennsylvania are problematic, and there's absolutely, and Georgia. That's going to seem to be shaken out. It just seems that they're doing a lot of amateur type of mistakes.
And Arizona, I think I got to throw Arizona in there too.
And that's right, Arizona too. I think that they're making mistakes and that are amateurish, and you can't buy that back that time. And Tony, that as you've run successful campaigns yourself, that's one thing that you try to not create mistakes that you have to go back and fix.
I had a meeting this morning with a congressman who's running for the United States Senate in North Carolina, Ted Budd, and very bright guy, a good patriot, understands the issues. He's running in North Carolina, which I think by every stretch of imagination is either characterized as a swing state or as a purple state, and he's running against the former Chief Justice of that state, an African-American woman. So I think it's going to be a tough seat. Now, he was endorsed by Trump, and he beat a former governor of North Carolina, a very popular governor, McCrory, and he was victorious. But when you sat down with him, you saw he understood what the country needed, what the people in North Carolina needed. He understood the threats to the country, what the issues were. He had a real sense of balance. He was a real grown-up. And I walked away from our meeting very, very impressed. And I said to myself, these are the kinds of people that we need to have in the United States Senate. It's absolutely essential because you have a White House which is out of control, which doesn't respect the difference between an executive order and legislation, which is pushing forward, for example, giving a write-off on student loans, which is a total sham. It's going to only raises taxes. It's inflationary. It's a kick in the face to everybody who, like Tony or you or me, who've paid for the tuition for ourselves or for our kids. It's a terrible thing, but it's using governmental money, and he's going to try to do this by executive order, which I don't think he has the legal authority to do this before the midterms. There's a lot of bad policy and bad economics and bad national security decisions coming out of the Biden administration. It becomes absolutely essential, again, as a House Democrat, I'm saying this, that there's a countervailing force, countervailing voices of reason and common sense. And the only way we can get that, unfortunately, is through the Republican Party, because my party doesn't seem to be able to rein in its crazy left.
You mean to tell me, Judge, that saying to these young people that I'm going to give you up to $10,000 off of your student loans, but only if the Democrats get elected, that's not buying votes, right?
Jesse, don't you think, doesn't it make your eyes bleed and your head explode to you? I want the money back. I have 4 degrees that I paid for myself. I want that back. My wife has 2 degrees. I want that money back. I have 2 daughters, one an MBA, one a lawyer. I want all that money back.
And now they're buying votes with your tax dollars. Gotta love it.
What do you say, Jesse?
I can't. I'm not going to disagree with you at all. I want my college tuition back at that point too. The problem is, the Democrats want to. There's an endless pit of money from the Democrats' point of view, but it creates our debt and it leads to our inflation. We're seeing that right now at record inflation, and their playbook goes back. They go back to their playbook all the time when their policies are failing, and and in real time they're being felt, whether it's economically, crime in the streets, or internationally, where we don't feel safe on a national security basis because we've become small on the global scale. They go to their playbook of trying to distract and buy off. It may have worked in some cases. I don't believe it's going to work this time.
Jesse, and I used to say this all the time because the media has actually bought into it and helped the Democrats create this. So if you ask someone, what do you think of the New York City public school system? They say, oh, it's terrible. It's poorly run. They waste money. How about if I told you I was going to give an extra $3 billion to the school system, but I had to raise your taxes? Oh, okay, as long as you're giving them more money. But you just said it was poorly run. But that they've convinced everyone that money is the answer for all of these problems. Just throw more money at it, and it's not going to get better. Good. How about running it the way it should be run?
Look, this is a crisis because let's talk about the state legislature, Jesse and Tony. So you have a Democratic Socialist of America, a woman named Gonzalez, just won an open state Senate seat in Queens, and she's out there pounding her chest and bragging. She said, "The socialists won. The socialists won. Now we're going to take over the city. We're going to have socialist slates everywhere, top to bottom, throughout the whole country." And I say to this, and by the way, she's 26 years old, so what has she ever done in her life? What does she actually know about economics, public policy, the law, the institutions of our country? What does she know? She doesn't. And by the way, the dirty little secret about this woman before she ran for the state Senate, she floated herself out as a working class person. She was a tech person. No, actually, she was a product leader for American Express. So taking you off the campaign literature, the fact that she worked for the biggest capitalist enterprise you can ever think of, American Express, but she packages herself as a working class person, kind of like AOC.
Yeah, you kind of wonder if they understand where the tax dollars come from. They see the dollar figure in the budget and they think they get to carve it up. But year after year, that money has to come from somewhere. And if you're destroying businesses and chasing people who pay big taxes out, before long, that money's not going to be there.
You mean sometimes you run out of other people's money?
Exactly. You run out of other people's money. No, again, these people have only signed the front of a paycheck. They've never, they've only signed the back of a paycheck. They've never actually paid employees.
No, they never had to open up the doors to the...
pay the rent, pay the staff.
Close it, pay the insurance, pay the staff what they were owed, take care of the health care, take care of the family leave obligations.
It's very easy with government money because it's always there, they think.
And with government money being poured out, if you don't think that's a proximate cause of inflation, I don't know, then you really need a basic economics course. All right, this is Judge Richard Weinberg. This is the Long Island Report. I'm with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and Tony Carbonetti, the former Chief of Staff to Mayor Rudy Giuliani, a great friend and a great public servant. We're taking a break. We'll be back in a moment.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit theupsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
The Long Island Report. Best of.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Tony Carbonetti, former Chief of Staff to Mayor Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, as well as Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, my esteemed co-host. There's this idea out there that they keep pushing through. The Democrats in the New York State legislature push this through, and Governor Hochul says she's all aboard on it, and it's called congestion pricing. And I think it's a bad idea, and I'd like to know what its true costs are and what the impacts are. Tony, what do you say?
We've been talking about congestion pricing for 20 plus years. In that 20-year period, has anyone done it successfully where we can turn to them and say, great, you guys did a wonderful job. Let's copy that. Am I missing that place?
London is walking away from it. They're trying to get out of it right now as we speak.
So we want to get into it.
Makes perfect sense.
Let's buy some Bitcoin while we're at it.
Well, listen, the same people who love socialism love congestion pricing. Ideas that don't work are totally impractical, but they force them through one-party rule down people's throats. And Jesse, who's going to be hurt by this congestion pricing? What's its true cost?
It's a middle-class taxpayer who's going to be paying $35 a day. It's not even just people from Long Island going into New York City. It's, from borough. But what's scary is that in all the 20 years that we've been discussing congestion pricing and never finding a pilot program or even anything that we could copy that shows it's successful, is that these crazy one-party rules, progressive Democrats, they have the ability and the wherewithal to just impose it without care, just because it's another notch in their political belt.
Well,
that's the scariest part of it.
No, it's scary because they have this narrative that somehow this is going to help save the planet and the environment. So let me submit to you, as the common sense Democrat dealing with two common sense Republicans on this show, let me tell you as follows. It's bad for commuters because it's a tax on commuters. It's bad for economic development and the economic viability of the city of New York because the restaurants will go down, the theater won't work, the cultural institutions will go down, retail will go down, people will not come here, trucking costs will go up, so the price of groceries and commodities will go up. And environmentally, you know what's going to happen? They're going to have a zone that if you go below 60th Street, then you're going to have to pay this. So what you're going to do is you get everybody avoiding coming in from the south part, and they're going to lined up in the Bronx. And what you're going to have is you're going to have all that pollution on the Cross Bronx Expressway going into the atmosphere because the pollution knows where to stop, doesn't it? Pollution knows. It knows exactly where that red line is that the crazy environmentalists are pushing.
No, I think, I would, again, if I worked for the governor right now, I would say, here's a handful of people we need to talk to. The people that did it in London. Talk to the restaurant, who heads the restaurant association, the taxi cab association. Let's talk to the people in government, the budget guy, the, tourism person, and let's find out what happened. Before we jump into this pool, let's go talk to the people that actually did it.
The city of New York is still trying to recover from the COVID crisis. And what do we have? 40% occupancy in the commercial buildings?
If we're lucky.
And you walk up and down the streets and you see all this open retail for rent signs. And tons of restaurants have gone out of business. And there's no audience in the theater community or Lincoln Center or Carnegie Hall. And the museums are underpopulated with tourists. We've gone from 60, I think John Castillo says 66 million people a year coming into the city. We have a fraction of that from foreign tourists. And now on top of that, you want to have a tax on working people to pay this. And the numbers are staggering. This will be in the thousands and thousands of thousands of dollars for people coming in.
So we're technically, I believe, sitting in the zone now, correct? We're on 50th and 3rd.
Exactly right.
So on Lexington, there's 3 hotels between 48th and 51st.
Including the Waldorf Astoria.
But that have yet to, well, that's 4. I wasn't even counting that. That's 4 that have yet to open.
Right.
So
and plus you have a whole bunch of...
Reopening's not been easy, and they want to add this.
Yeah, and you have a whole bunch of hotels, by the way. That's a good point, Tony, that have already announced that they're not reopening. For example, Guy Lombardo's, to give away my age, Guy Lombardo's Roosevelt Hotel, who always brought you in New Year's Eve. Jesse, you've probably read about that in the ancient history books.
Well, the other thing is, one part of the narrative is they want to encourage people to use mass transit. That's not going to happen. People don't feel safe in mass transit.
Are we giving out bulletproof vests?
Right. I mean, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you let your son on a subway in New York, Jesse? Would you let
Absolutely
your daughters,
not.
Tony?
Jesse, I have 2 daughters, 17 and 19. And quite honestly, 7 years ago, I was saying, okay, I have to teach them the subway system. They're New Yorkers. And I wouldn't let them go on the subway in a million years right now. The last 7 years have been so horrific. But 7 years ago, things were okay. And I was getting to the point where I got to teach them. Not a chance in hell right now.
Okay. Let's switch gears. I want to talk to you about what I call the Trump search warrant fiasco. Going back to an earlier theme we've been talking about, I see it as another nail in the coffin of American American unity. I think this was totally and absolutely, I say this as a lawyer, as a former state Supreme Court justice, and as a former prosecutor, I think this was totally and absolutely mishandled governmentally, politically, legally. What say you, Tony?
Short of child porn, they have no reason to go in there and raid the former president's home. I don't. They better have something good, because otherwise, all they're doing is empowering him. You know, if this is a note from one head of state to another head of state, is technically top secret. So if it's the Prime Minister of Japan, here's a dozen golf balls, have a good round. If
Because
that's the
everything
top secret,
because everything gets classified.
exactly. If that's your top, and if it's not, show me, because they have no credibility. They've lost credibility.
And I want to see that affidavit. And as we've said in the earlier segment, if it doesn't substantiate that there's something serious here, the Justice Department, the FBI have lost credibility, and they've lost an awful lot of credibility. And we have a crisis of public confidence in the law enforcement
Better be
agencies.
real.
It better be real, because again, going back to Jesse's point, we've lost confidence and trust in our institutions. I want to thank Tony Carbonetti, our special guest today, and
Thanks for having me.
And my wonderful co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. This has been the Long Island Report. We look forward to having you back with us again next week. We wish you and your families all good health and great safety. Thank you.